Everyone loves to listen to a good book, and there are so many wonderful ones to choose, so we decided to bring you this podcast of Stories Come to Life. Each episode features a story from either classic or modern literature, especially chosen to be interesting and exciting to hear. So sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Welcome to Stories Come to Life. I am your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. Nancy Drew and her father, the lawyer Carson Drew, are very close. So Nancy is extremely worried when he hasn't returned when he promised he would. It is so distracting to Nancy that she can hardly keep her mind on the case of the haunted house. Then, some new information gives her the first clue in the case. Somehow, she is sure, that despicable miser, Nathan Gombit, is involved in the situation. Now sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Nancy Drew, The Hidden Staircase. Chapter 13, Another Surprise. For a full minute, Nancy Drew stood staring blankly at the telegram in her hand. She read it a second time, although she knew every word by memory. Worry assailed her anew. If her father had left Chicago 2 days before, as the telegram indicated, he would have reached Cliffwood before this, even if he had come on the slowest train. Surely something must have happened to him en route. What had delayed him? After a moment's reflection, Nancy entered the house, intending to tell the Turnbull sisters about the telegram and ask their advice. She was destined never to carry the thought into action, for as she closed the door behind her, she heard a wild shriek from above. It seemed to come from Floretta's room. Fearing the worst, Nancy sprang toward the stairs and took them 2 at a time. Rosemary came running from the kitchen. Reaching Floretta's room, Nancy thrust open the door. "What is it?" she cried. Floretta stood in the center of the room, wringing her hands in anguish. "My dresses have been stolen!" "Your dresses?" Nancy echoed. "Yes, while we were at breakfast. Someone entered my room and took 3 of my best black silk dresses. And that isn't the worst. Look up there." Wonderingly, Nancy turned her eyes toward a picture which hung over the bed. What she saw caused her to gasp in astonishment. On the frame perched 2 live canary birds. "Oh!" Rosemary screamed. She had entered the room behind Nancy, and her eyes had fallen upon the picture frame. "It's wizardry," Floretta moaned. Cautiously, Nancy moved toward the picture. "Don't touch those birds," Rosemary advised. "Why, they're only tame little canaries," Nancy said, gently removing one from the frame. "See?" "Don't bring that bird near me," Floretta cried. "It's an evil omen." "I never heard of a canary being called an omen of bad luck," Nancy returned, studying the bird curiously. "A canary is a rather happy little bird. This one is, anyway." "Get them out of the house," Floretta pleaded. Obligingly, Nancy opened the window and set the 2 canaries free. "How did they ever get in here, anyway?" Rosemary demanded. "We never had a bird in our lives." Nancy was dumbfounded. Never had she heard of a more puzzling mystery. Had the canaries been left in the room by the same person who had stolen Floretta's dresses? Unquestionably, the birds could not have flown in a window, for they were kept carefully screened. So many strange things had occurred in the house. Unexplainable music and shadows and the sound of footsteps in the night. Then a spoon had disappeared. Next, a pocketbook, a diamond pin, an urn, and now Floretta's silk dresses. Nancy lost no time in examining the closet and the walls of the room, but she could find no clue which suggested in what manner an entrance had been effected. Apparently, the windows had not been opened. Nancy felt almost humiliated. She had promised to help Floretta and Rosemary, and so far she had not even gained a clue. Many things had happened under her very nose, and yet she had been unable to put her hands on the thief. There must be an explanation for everything, if only she could think of it. As she stood absorbed in her own unpleasant thoughts, a sudden idea came to her. "Do you know of anyone who wants to force you out of this house?" she demanded. Rosemary shook her head. "Why, no. Why should anyone want to do that?" "Is there anyone who wants to buy the house?" "We've had several offers from real estate men. There's some talk that the city wants this house for a historical museum." "And the real estate men are trying to get it cheap, in the hope of selling it to the city and making a neat profit for themselves," Nancy summarized shrewdly. "That's about it." "You don't intend to sell?" "We didn't, until lately. At least not unless we could get our price for it. Now we'd be lucky to sell it for anything, I guess. No one wants a haunted house." Nancy was eager to learn more, for now she felt she had stumbled upon her first clue. She was convinced that someone was trying to force the Mrs. Turnbull from their home, and by frightening them, induce them to sell the mansion at a low figure. "Who has tried to purchase the place?" she asked quickly. "Well, there's John O'Conley," Floretta told her. "What sort of a man is he?" "Oh, I'm sure he's honest. We've known him all our lives." "And then there was H.D. Fellows, another real estate agent," Rosemary added thoughtfully. "He made us a very straightforward offer, but he wasn't willing to meet our price. However, he was very nice about it when we told him we wouldn't sell." "Were there any others?" "Oh, Nathan Gombit, but we didn't consider his offer seriously," Rosemary continued. Nancy pricked up her ears at the information. Here was genuine news. "Nathan Gombit!" she exclaimed. "What sort of an offer did he make you?" "Oh, Gombit isn't honest," Floretta broke in feelingly. "We won't have anything to do with him any more. You see, he claimed we gave him an option to buy our house for $6,000. $6,000? Why, that's ridiculous. Surely you didn't give such an option." "Mercy, no, but Gombit claims we did." "The house is worth many times that amount," Rosemary declared. "And if the city should decide to use it for a historical museum, we ought to get even more for it than that." "I should think so," Nancy agreed. "Gombit was trying to cheat you." "We never gave him any sort of option," Floretta insisted. "We wouldn't do business with him at any price, because we couldn't trust him. He would cheat us out of our eye teeth." "How long ago did all this happen?" "Oh, it must have been nearly a year ago," Rosemary said, trying to recall. "It was last spring." "The matter went to court?" "No. Nathan Gombit threatened to make trouble and said he would sue us, but nothing ever came of it." "We had forgotten all about him until you brought up the subject," Floretta added. "Then have you heard nothing more from him since?" "He threatened us once," Rosemary told Nancy. "Said he would make us sorry we hadn't sold at his price. But nothing ever came of the threat." "How long ago was that?" 2 or 3 months ago, I should judge." Nancy Drew nodded thoughtfully and relapsed into deep meditation. She was now convinced that Nathan Gombit had some connection with the mysterious things which had been going on in the old house. Perhaps he was trying to frighten Rosemary and Floretta so that they would be glad to sell at his price. "Gombit hasn't approached you with a new offer recently, has he?" she asked. Floretta shook her head. "We haven't seen him for some time, And we don't want to either. You don't think Gombit has had anything to do with what has happened lately, do you? Rosemary questioned the girl. Of course I don't know, but I'm beginning to suspect there may be a connection, Nancy returned. At least, I intend to investigate that line and see what it leads to. To be sure. There's nothing in Nathan Gombit's character that would prevent his using any underhand method to induce us to sell him this house, said Rosemary musingly. Still, I don't see what opportunity he's had to do what's been done here. He hasn't been near us for some time, you know, Nancy. That's true, replied the girl, but someone must have made the opportunity. Mr. Gombit has the motive, and is so lacking in any sense of honor that would keep him from injuring you in this way. I believe he furnishes the best lead to follow. With that, she left the bedroom and went to her own room farther down the hall. But as she sat by the window, trying to think her way through the jumble of information she had gleaned, she found it difficult to keep her mind on the mystery. After a time, she took the crumpled telegram she had received earlier that morning from her pocket and studied it again. How could she interest herself in a mystery when her father was missing? What had happened to him? Oh, if only she could answer that question. Chapter 14. What Happened to Carson Drew? After taking leave of his daughter at the River Heights Railroad Station, Carson Drew boarded the Chicago train. Upon arriving in the city, he lost no time in dispatching the business which had brought him to the great city on the lake. He had expected to remain in Chicago a full week, but so successful were his negotiations that his business was completed a day earlier than he had anticipated. I may as well send Nancy a telegram and return a day earlier, Mr. Drew decided. Accordingly, he sent his daughter a message to the effect that he would arrive at the Cliffwood station the following morning. He then boarded the night flyer. He did not dream that the telegram would never reach Nancy. It was destined to fall into the hands of an enemy. Oblivious of impending danger, Mr. Drew settled himself comfortably in the Pullman and took up a newspaper. The train had been moving perhaps an hour when the conductor came through and paused at his seat. Carson Drew? He inquired. That's my name. Then here's a telegram for you. We picked it up at the last station. Wonderingly, Mr. Drew accepted the envelope and quickly ripped it open. He smiled with pleasure as he read the message. We'll meet you at the Cliffwood station. Nancy. Well, I'm glad to know she received my message, he thought, though I didn't expect her to answer the telegram. I'm greatly relieved that nothing happened to her while I was in Chicago. Somehow I didn't like the idea of letting her go off to that old stone house by herself. Anything might have happened. Relieved that all was well with his daughter, Carson Drew settled himself to enjoy the evening paper. After reading it for perhaps an hour, he tossed it aside and went out to the observation car to give the porter an opportunity to make up his berth. After smoking a cigar, he returned, and before he retired, left an order for the porter to call him in the morning. In spite of the sway and rumble of the train, he slept soundly and did not open his eyes until the porter called him. 20 minutes out of Cliffwood, sir. Mr. Drew dressed himself hastily and prepared to get off at the station. He was eager to see Nancy again, for it seemed a month since he had been at home. It was nice of her to offer to meet him at such an early hour, he told himself. It was not yet 7 o'clock. The train came to a stop, and he swung from the step to the platform. Where was Nancy? Carson Drew glanced about in all directions, but his daughter was not in sight. Perhaps she has been delayed, he thought. Oh well, no matter. He would wait a few minutes, and then, if she failed to come along, he could call a taxi. He picked up his bag and started toward the waiting room, but he had taken less than a dozen steps when he saw a man hurrying toward him. Carson Drew frowned as he saw who it was. He had no desire to meet Nathan Gombit. Undoubtedly the man would try to argue with him again about his so-called property rights on the river. That fellow is a pest, Mr. Drew told himself. Just my luck to run into him. But as Nathan Gombit approached, he could not help but see the man was laboring under great excitement. Wonder what's the matter with him now, he asked himself curiously. Nathan Gombit came straight toward him. "Oh, Mr. Drew," he cried as he came up, "I have terrible news. Your daughter has been injured. You must come quickly." "Nancy is hurt?" Mr. Drew grasped him roughly by the arm. "It can't be." "She's badly injured, but the doctors think she has a chance to pull through." "How horrible!" Carson Drew groaned. "She's calling for you. You must come quickly. Take me to her." In his anxiety to reach the daughter he loved so dearly, Carson Drew became almost frantic. "Here, jump in," Gombit ordered. He opened the front door of a battered auto, which stood near the platform. Mr. Drew, bewildered and shocked from the crushing news, obeyed without question. Gombit scrambled in after him. He took the wheel, and with one quick glance about, started off down the street. The station on this side was practically deserted, and no one saw the car depart. "Where's Nancy?" Mr. Drew demanded. "At my house." "At your house?" Mr. Drew asked in surprise. "Didn't they take her to a hospital?" "She was too badly injured to be moved," Nathan explained glibly. "Oh, my poor little girl," Carson Drew murmured brokenly. A moment later he said, "You didn't tell me how she was hurt." "In an automobile accident. Her roadster ran off into a ditch." "And she was taken to your place?" Mr. Drew did not like the look on Nathan Gombit's face. Was the man deceiving him? No, it was more likely he was trying to keep Nancy's true condition from him. Perhaps she had been so seriously injured that she was practically at the point of death. The thought nearly drove him wild. "The accident occurred in front of my house," Gombit continued, trying to make his explanation appear plausible. "The doctor brought her inside." "Oh, and Nancy was always such a safe driver, too." "I didn't see the accident myself, but they say the steering gear broke." "Tell me, will she live?" "I can't tell you that." The drive, though not a long one, seemed endless to Carson Drew. Nancy, his daughter, his little girl. The widowed father and the motherless girl were very close to each other. In what condition would he find her when he reached the end of this soul-trying drive? Was she conscious? Was she alive? He turned impatiently to Nathan Gombit. "Hurry," Mr. Drew urged. "I can't get there quickly enough." "The car won't go any faster," Gombit grunted. And indeed it would not. Gombit was already driving as fast as he dared. Carson Drew was so worried that he asked no more questions, but kept his eyes glued upon the road. Gombit drove furiously, and they soon reached the outskirts of Cliffwood. Presently they came within sight of two large stone houses, and Nathan Gombit turned in at one of them. "I live here," he explained. Carson Drew did not so much as give the house a casual glance. The instant the car stopped, he sprang to the ground and started for the door. Quick as he was, Nathan Gombit was ahead of him. He opened the door for the lawyer and led the way through the kitchen, where a fat, slovenly old woman was working over the stove. Had Mr. Drew not been intent upon reaching the bedside of his daughter, he would have observed that the old woman received a significant nod from Nathan Gombit as he passed near her. The moment the two men had passed into the next room, She walked over and quietly locked the outside door. "This way," Nathan directed. He opened a door and indicated a long, dark stairway. Without hesitation, Carson Drew followed him. He went up a flight of circular stairs and came at last to a landing. Nathan paused and indicated a door to the left. "Your daughter is in there," he said. There was an eager, cruel gleam in his eyes, but Carson Drew did not notice. "It won't frighten her for me to go right in?" the lawyer asked anxiously. "No, it won't frighten her." Hesitating no longer, Carson Drew opened the door and stepped inside. To his surprise, the room was dark. The curtains were pulled down over the windows, and at first he could see nothing. Then, as his eyes became accustomed to the darkness, he saw that he was not in a bedroom. The place had every appearance of a prison. Carson Drew realized that he had walked into a trap. He wheeled about and faced Nathan Gombit, who stood in the doorway, eyeing him, gloating upon him. "What does this mean?" he demanded. "Where is Nancy?" "It means that you are my prisoner," Gombit retorted with an evil leer. "Before I get through with you, I guess you'll come to terms about that property." With that, he slammed the door shut, and before Carson Drew could make a move, turned the key in the lock. As the old miser trudged down the corridor, his hollow laughter echoed through the house. Chapter 15. A Prisoner. As he heard the key turn in the lock, Carson Drew stood for a moment as though paralyzed. Things had happened so rapidly since he had left the train at the Cliffwood station that he could scarcely think logically. The fear that Nancy had been injured had driven everything else from his mind. Now he realized that all unwittingly he had walked into a trap. Angrily he jerked at the door, but it would not give. He kicked at it savagely, but after a few minutes was convinced that it could not be broken down, even with a ram, for it was made of extra heavy wood. He did not cry out for help, for he realized that there was no one near who could aid him. At last he sank down into a chair. What a fool he had been not to suspect a plot. It was all clear to him now. Undoubtedly, Gombit had intercepted the telegram which he had sent to Nancy, or in some way had learned of the lawyer's intended visit to Cliffwood. He had lied about Nancy in order to induce him to come to this house. "I don't care what Nathan does to me if only Nancy is safe," Carson Drew thought. What had become of her? He did not believe she had been hurt, as Nathan had stated, but it was possible that the miser had taken her prisoner also. Nervously, Carson Drew paced the floor. The room was dark, but as his eyes became accustomed to it, he noticed a small window far above. The window was heavily barred. "Evidently this room was fitted up for a prison," he told himself grimly. "I imagine Nathan Gombit has been biding his time to get me here." There was little furniture in the room, nothing but a cot, a table, and a chair. Mr. Drew pulled the table across the room, and by standing on it, was able to look out the window. The courtyard was far below, and one glance disclosed the fact that even if it were possible to break the bars, he could not hope to escape. It would be suicide to drop to the ground, and there was no tree or building nearby. "Nathan thought of everything," Carson Drew observed dryly. "He has me completely at his mercy." Just what Gombit would do to him, Mr. Drew did not know, but he suspected the miser would go to any length to gain his end. "I'll never give in to him," he resolved firmly. Presently, glancing out of the window again, he noticed a stone house some distance away, which appeared not unlike the one in which he was imprisoned. "Can that be the Turnbull house?" he questioned himself. He tried to recall the description Nancy had given him, and every detail tallied. He was convinced that the stone house was indeed the mansion. "I wonder if Nancy is still there," flashed through his mind. "Oh, if only she returns to River Heights before that fiend gets his hands on her." It was characteristic of Carson Drew to think of his daughter's safety before his own. She was always first. As the hours dragged slowly on, he kept a close watch of the neighboring house, hoping to catch a glimpse of Nancy or someone to whom he could signal. At noon, the old woman appeared with his luncheon, which consisted of bread and water, shoved through a small hole at the bottom of the door. Mr. Drew drank the water, but did not touch the bread. All afternoon he maintained his watch at the tiny window. The Turnbull home appeared deserted. What had become of Nancy? Had she already departed, or was she, too, held a prisoner at the hands of Gombit? Toward evening, Carson Drew was startled to hear heavy footsteps in the corridor. He scrambled down from the window, but there was not time to move the table back into place. Nathan Gombit stepped into the room. Carefully locking the door, he placed an oil lamp on the table and gave Carson Drew a gloating grin. "How do you like it here by this time?" he asked with elaborate politeness. "Oh, it's very pleasant," Mr. Drew returned sarcastically. "You may as well put your cards on the table, Nathan Gombit. What do you want of me?" Nathan became intently eager. "You know what I want," he muttered. "You must pay me for my land, and sign a paper that you will not prosecute. If you'll do that, I'll let you go free." "Indeed?" "Yes," Nathan smiled gleefully. "I want a check for $20,000, and if you know what's wise, you'll hand it over without batting an eyelash." Carson Drew smiled grimly. "You old reprobate, you'll never get a cent." While he had been talking, Mr. Drew had done fast thinking. Now he made a sudden spring toward Nathan Gombit, intending to overpower him. Quick as the action was, the old miser was prepared. Taking a step backward, he deliberately pulled a gun upon the lawyer. "Oh, no, you don't," he snarled. "And just for that trick, I'm going to tie you up." Still covering Mr. Drew with the revolver, and never taking his eyes from the lawyer's face, Gombit cautiously backed up to the door and unlocked it. The heavy-set old woman, whom Mr. Drew had seen in the kitchen, came into the room so quickly that it was obvious she had been standing just outside the door, ready to aid the miser when summoned. "Tie him up," Nathan ordered harshly. "Yes, sir." The old woman disappeared, to return in a few minutes with heavy ropes. As she waddled across the floor, she clumsily brushed against Nathan and entangled one of his feet in the ropes. "Take care what you're doing," the miser reprimanded her sharply. He gave the rope a savage kick, and then emitted a howl of pain. "Tarnation, but that leg does hurt," he muttered. "I fell on a broken step and just about killed myself. Leg's pained me ever since." He wheeled upon the old woman as though she were responsible for his misfortune, but without ceasing to cover Carson Drew with the revolver. "Get a move on there. Tie that man up and be quick about it." "Yes, sir." Sullenly, the old woman set herself to the task. With the pistol staring him in the face, the lawyer dared not resist. He was pushed roughly into a chair and securely bound to it with the heavy ropes. "Now how do you like it?" Nathan Gombit demanded with satisfaction when the task had been completed. Carson Drew did not give him the pleasure of an answer. "Now will you come to my terms?" "I will not." Nathan stared at the lawyer in disbelief. He had not believed that Mr. Drew would dare defy him. That's your final decision? It is. You'll be glad enough to come to my terms when I get through with you, Carson Drew. Do your worst, Carson Drew smiled provokingly. Then his eyes narrowed. But remember this, you'll be brought to justice in the end, and when you are, the law won't be lenient with you. The law? Gombit laughed scornfully. A lot of good it will ever do you. You'll never see your daughter or your friends again, unless you give me the money. Will you sign the papers? I've given you your answer. Can't you understand plain English? All right, I've given you your last chance. Nathan's face became convulsed with rage. In a day or so, you'll be glad enough to do as I ask. I'll starve you to it. Carson Drew shrugged his shoulders indifferently. Nathan Gombit saw that his threat had made little impression upon the lawyer. And if that ain't enough to bring you to time, he added with a wicked laugh, I'll get your daughter here, too. A look of horror came into Mr. Drew's eyes. You couldn't do that. Why, you don't even know where she is. Oh, don't I? She's right at the Turnbull's house. I can get her easily any night. Just have to dope her a bit, that's all. You fiend! Carson Drew struggled at his bonds, but he was helpless. Nathan Gombit laughed again and turned toward the door. No more food or water for you, he called back as he turned to leave. Carson Drew heard the key turn in the lock, and then he was left to sober reflection. He did not doubt that Nathan Gombit would attempt to carry out his ugly threat. That night, he might enter the mansion and abduct Nancy. The thought made him ill. What can I do? He asked himself miserably. Perhaps, after all, I had better do as Nathan asks. Chapter 16. A New Clue. For 2 days after the arrival of the telegram from Chicago, which stated that Carson Drew had left for home, Nancy waited hopefully, but as the time passed, and no word was received from her father, her anxiety intensified. All sorts of unpleasant thoughts began to trouble her. Had her father met with an accident? Perhaps in crossing the street, he had been struck by an automobile. Oh, if only he would come, or send word of his whereabouts. The suspense was almost unendurable. At the repeated urging of Rosemary and Floretta, she consented to remain at the mansion until she received news from her father. But the strain of waiting was beginning to tell heavily upon her. Since Carson Drew had left River Heights, she had not even received a letter from him. Nancy's interest in the mystery of the old stone house gradually lessened. She was still determined to solve the enigma, but the fear that something had happened to her father overshadowed all else. Since the theft of the silk dresses from Floretta's room, nothing had happened to disturb the tranquility of the Turnbull household, although an atmosphere of suspense seemed to hover over the entire house. Sometimes Nancy thought that the very silence of the place would drive her into hysterics. She longed to depart, but for the sake of Floretta and Rosemary, she remained. Several times she had searched the house in the hope of finding secret openings in the walls, but although when she rapped them a few had a hollow sound, she was never able to find any hidden door. It was discouraging. Since Nancy had learned that Nathan Gombit was endeavoring to purchase the Turnbull Mansion at a ridiculously low price, she felt that she had struck a valuable clue. In her own mind, she was firmly convinced that the miser had some connection with the strange things which had been going on in the house. She had no way of establishing the identity of the thief, but she was certain that it was either Gombit or someone employed by him. He intends to scare Rosemary and Floretta into selling at any price Nancy thought. It's up to me to quench his little game. She was at a loss to know what course to follow. If only her father were there to give her advice. As a last resort, I'll go to Gombit and have a talk with him, she decided. By skillful questioning, I may be able to learn something which will incriminate him. Nancy was well aware that Nathan Gombit was clever as well as scheming. It would be difficult to convict him of entering the mansion. That she knew. She could not cause him to be arrested upon suspicion. I must find a way to prove that he is the guilty one, she thought. If I delay too long, something terrible may happen here. That miser is a desperate man when crossed. Convinced that it was unwise to postpone her visit to the home of the miser, she determined to visit him that very day, although she dreaded the ordeal. "Can you tell me where Nathan Gombit lives?" she asked Rosemary at the luncheon table. "Why, don't you know?" Rosemary asked. "He lives in the old stone house directly back of us." Nancy gave an exclamation of surprise. "I wish I had known that before." "We would have mentioned it, but we thought you knew." "You think Gombit has something to do with the mystery?" Floretta questioned curiously. "I'm almost certain of it. But to prove my theory will not be easy. Nathan is as clever as he is scheming. Tell me, how long has he lived in the old stone house?" "Oh, for years. And a mighty unpleasant neighbor he is, too." "I can imagine," said Nancy, smiling grimly. "You see, there's quite a story connected with Nathan's ownership of the house," Floretta began. "Would you care to hear it?" "Indeed I would." "The house was originally built by a Turnbull. That explains why it so closely resembles our own." "Both homes were built by the same man?" Nancy asked. "No, by two brothers." It was Rosemary who answered. "They were devoted to each other, and for that reason they built their houses close together, although, as you can see, they are on different roads. When the Civil War broke out, the brothers had their first disagreement," Floretta continued the story. "William, the brother who owned this house, was a staunch supporter of the Union, but the other brother joined the Confederate forces." "He gave his life as well as his fortune to the cause," Rosemary broke in. "He was killed in action," Floretta finished. "After his death it was learned that he had heavily mortgaged his home. Everything went to pay the debts. The house passed from one person to another until it finally fell into the hands of Nathan Gombit." "But why does he want to buy your home?" Nancy demanded, with a puzzled frown. "If he hopes to sell to the city, why doesn't he give up his own house?" "The city doesn't want it," Rosemary explained. "He did try to sell. His house doesn't have as interesting history as ours does, and he has permitted it to run down. It's in a terrible condition now. I shouldn't be surprised any day to see it tumble from its foundation." "Nathan has always been queer," Floretta remarked. "As long as we can remember, he has lived alone." "Not exactly alone," Rosemary broke in. "He keeps a servant, an old woman who looks as though she were an ogre." "And birds," Floretta added. "His house fairly swarms with them. When they die, he stuffs them. Ugh!" she shuddered. "You couldn't hire me to go near his place." "You say he keeps birds?" Nancy inquired with quickening interest. "What kind?" "Oh, most every kind, I guess," Rosemary answered. "Parrots. You can hear them screeching clear over here sometimes." "Does he keep canaries?" Nancy questioned eagerly. "Oh, yes," Rosemary agreed. The significance of the question did not dawn upon Rosemary and Floretta, and Nancy did not tell them what was in her mind. At once she thought of the two canaries, which had found their way into the mansion so mysteriously. Was it not likely that Nathan Gombit had brought the birds from his own home? But how had he succeeded in entering the mansion without being discovered? That question remained unanswered. I must visit the other house without delay, she told herself. But how can I manage it? If I openly call upon Mr. Gombit, he's certain to suspect my purpose, and perhaps hold me as a prisoner. If only she could find a way to enter the house without Nathan's knowledge. I'll keep a close watch on the house, and I may see him leave, she decided. If I do, that will be my chance. Nancy was excited at the information which she had secured, and eager for action. She felt that the solution to the mystery was almost within her grasp. She laid her plans carefully. She refrained from telling Rosemary and Floretta of her intention to visit Gombit's house, for she knew they would be afraid to permit her to attempt the dangerous mission. If conditions are right, I'll slip away this very night, she resolved. All that afternoon, she moved restlessly about the house, making frequent trips to the window to glance searchingly toward the old stone dwelling, which was half hidden by tall trees. Time never dragged more slowly, Nancy complained. I wish night would come. She ate little dinner, for as the hour approached, she realized more keenly than before that she was about to undertake a dangerous adventure. Clouds had been forming in the sky all afternoon, and by the time the shadows began to gather, a drizzly rain had set in. Nothing could have pleased her more. "What a horrible night," Floretta remarked nervously, as she glanced at the rain-splashed windows. "I hope we don't have another visit from our ghost. It's just the sort of night for something to happen." Rosemary looked displeased at this audible expression of her sister's nervousness. Nancy smiled reassuringly. "I have a feeling that this is going to be an unlucky night for our ghost," she said evenly. "And now, if you will excuse me, I believe I'll retire early." After saying good night to Rosemary and Floretta, Nancy Drew went directly to her room. But she did not prepare for bed. On this night, she had an important mission ahead of her. This is your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories Come to Life. Be sure to join us next time when we continue to listen to The Hidden Staircase. You can find a link to our podcast on the Marshall Public Library webpage, www.marshallpl.org. I'll talk to you again soon.